In this room, we have 0xB10C, who is a Bitcoin developer curious about what is happening on the Bitcoin network. He builds tools to visualize and observe, for example, the mempool, the P2P network, mining pools, and protocol-level statistics. Additionally, he worked on Bitcoin Core from time to time and maintains bitcoin-dev.blog. A Brink grant currently supports his work. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here to talk about Bitcoin mining pool transaction monitoring in the context of censorship detection, and can we actually see censorship on the Bitcoin mining pool level happening. I'm 0xB10C. As said, I'm a Bitcoin developer and currently sponsored by Brink. The story starts with this press release by Marathon Digital Holdings, and they announced in March 30 last year that they will be setting up a new pool, and they have licensed technology to filter transactions in their pool. They won't be mining all transactions that are in the mempool. They will be filtering out certain transactions, and here they will be filtering out non-AML compliant and non-OFAC compliant transactions. Obviously, this wasn't too well received by the Bitcoin community. This goes against one of the key properties of Bitcoin, which is the censorship resistance, where we would say no one should be able to prevent others from interacting with the network, and no one should be able to indefinitely block a valid transaction from being confirmed. Important to note, obviously, Bitcoin is permissionless, so pools can choose to confirm not a transaction, but we want that a competitive transaction paying a competitive fee should confirm at some point in time. And this raises the question, can we detect transaction censorship by mining pools? The current Bitcoin mining landscape is pooled mining, and it has been for a few years. We use the Stratum V1 protocol here. A pool sends the miners or the ASIC a mining job. The miner starts mining on it, is creating shares on it, sends them back to the pool, and at some point it either finds a block or it gets a new job, for example. And this mining job contains various data. It contains, for example, metadata, like the job ID and so on. It contains the block version. It contains the previous hash. It also contains parts of the Coinbase transaction. And most importantly, it contains branches of the Merkle tree of the transactions that are included in the block. So this is the Merkle tree of the transactions that are in the block, and the blue parts are actually received by the ASIC miner, by the actual miner that is mining the block from the pool. The yellow parts are computed by the miner, and the gray parts are hidden from the miner. And this is the big thing. Miners don't actually know which transactions they are mining. Here, transaction, for example, transaction 2 and 27 are not obvious to the miner that is actually providing the hashing power. To continue in the story, roughly 1 year ago, on May 5th, 2021, Marathon Pool then announced in a press release that they directed all the hash rate to this new pool that would be censoring transactions. And 1 day later, they found their first block. In this block, they included this string in the Coinbase, Marapool OFAC compliant block. They didn't really censor anything yet, at least that's what we think. And we wanted to know why or what is being censored. So on the same day, I published my project I had been working on over the past 3 months then, miningpool.observer. which brings transparency into mining pool transaction selection. This is open source. You can run it yourself. I also have a version running on miningpool.observer. So how did the block that Marathon mined actually look like? Oops, sorry, no, that's the next slide. So what I'm doing is I'm comparing the templates from my node that my node provides with the actual block that was mined by the mining pool. Here we can, for example, see transactions that are missing from the block or transactions that are extra to the block, but mostly we see transactions that are shared between the block and the template. We usually expect this number to be high. If we see a transaction missing, okay, we might think, okay, it could be censored, but it could be for some other reason be missing as well. Obviously, some pools include their own transactions in their block, so that would be an extra transaction. So, and now looking at the Marathon block, the first one, we can see there were 5 transactions were missing from the block. There were 166 shared transactions. These were really big, so the block was actually full. That's why it's only one, like normally it's 10 times this or more. And there were 12 extra transactions in the block. And we can actually see that the mining pool did lose a bit of fee here. So Bitcoin around $100 at the moment in transaction fees compared to the block template my node generated. But that's usual. There's always some differences here. Sometimes it's more. Sometimes the pool gains a bit more. Sometimes the pool loses a bit. But on average, that's totally in the normal way. And we can actually look in my tool. We can actually look into which transactions are missing. Here, important. The 5 missing transactions were all pretty young. One of them was RBF signaling. One of them was secret spending and really large. But all of them were really young. Had been in my mempool for 12 seconds. So this is totally in the realm of reasonability. So having them missing from the block is fine. I don't think they were censored here. On the other side, we see 12 extra transactions. One of them is the Coinbase transactions. Obviously, we don't have that in the Coinbase in the block in the template. Sorry. And the others are low fee rate transactions that we didn't include in our block because we had these really young transactions in the template. So, but what did we see over the past year there? What were actually the observations we had? So one thing that's really interesting to look at is transaction missing from multiple blocks. Also conflicts between blocks and the template. And of course, extra transactions, which transactions do mining pools prefer over other transactions. To start, why are transactions sometimes missing from mining pools, from blocks? One obvious reason is the transaction didn't really propagate well on the network or hasn't propagated to the pool yet. And as mentioned, other transactions are sometimes prioritized, which pushes out low fee rate transactions of the block if there are other prioritized transactions at the top of the block. Conflicts with other transactions, obviously if the miner doesn't know about a transaction we don't know about, and they conflict, we don't have them in our node, then we see this as missing as well. Or what we are looking for is actually filtering. This is probably the last resort. Here, the transaction is filtered, the transaction is censored. This is also a valid reason for a transaction being missing from a block. One example I have is upon Taproot activation last year, there were a lot of people sending out their first pay to Taproot spends, including funny up return messages and so on. And we saw them entering right upon Taproot activation once they were valid on the policy layer. And then we waited for the first block to arrive. The first block arrived, didn't include any pay to Taproot spends. Second block arrived, didn't include any taproot spans. Third block arrived, didn't include any taproot spans. These blocks were from F2 pool and unpool, and we first thought, okay, maybe there is something wrong with our taproot upgrade, something wrong with our taproot activation. It turned out that these pools actually had upgraded, they were running the correct code, everything was fine, but their peers weren't upgraded. They were only connected to old peers. We didn't relay these new transactions to them yet. They were not censored. And some days later, they actually started mining pay-to-taproot spans, and it turned out to be fine. Then a similar story here. We saw a lot of counterparty transactions missing from blocks by F2 pool and via BTC. This was a bit weird because some of the F2 pool blocks and BTC pool blocks include counterparty transactions. So counterparty is a protocol on building up on top of Bitcoin for something like NFTs. Has been around way longer than the word NFT, and we weren't too sure why these transactions weren't actually included in the blocks. I checked with F2 pool, for example, and they said we don't know anything about filtering these transactions. Maybe there is something wrong with our peers, and to this date, I'm not sure why they're missing and why they're included in some blocks, but it's safe to say that, for example, these three beautiful trading card NFTs weren't included in the blocks, but they were included in the following blocks. So another reason a transaction can be missing is obviously due to conflict. Here, a transaction paying 42 Satoshi per vbyte, at the time a very high fee rate to pay, wasn't included in 11 block was included in 11 block templates, but wasn't included in a high number of pools actually. And it turned out that this transaction was actually conflicting with another transaction that was on the network, broadcast on the network as well. Here, or actually multiple transactions probably that were broadcast on the network as well. Here, an 80 Satoshi per vbyte transaction was mined, and it in fact had a different output and even output type attached to it. So why are these transactions on the network? So one idea would be, okay, there is a double spend attempt, and in fact we can be pretty sure that this was a double spend attempt because looking at the UTXO that was being spent, we know it belongs to this address, and this address is special. I can tell you the private key to this address, so can many other people. This is a commonly used brain wallet, and somebody is monitoring these brain wallets, has a bot, and is just stealing the money as soon as it arrives, and is sending out transactions, or multiple people are doing this. Here, a very similar story by Foundry. I know Foundry guys are here. Hi. So what happened here is my node knew about a really high fee rate transaction of nearly 200 Satoshi per vbyte, paying to one output type, but actually Foundry included a transaction paying only a tenth of the fees here. They probably didn't know about the high fee rate transaction, and I can be pretty sure that they don't run any bots. Otherwise, they would probably have just included the transaction with a 0 fee here. Then, obviously, one thing is common, and Gloria mentioned this yesterday. There is RBF on the network, and one use case of RBF is replacing or fee bumping transactions, so they are more likely to be included in the next block. Here, this is from a Stacks v2 blocks commit, where they are fee bumping the transaction every 1 minute by 2 Satoshi per vbyte, and my node only knew about an older transaction than the actual pool that mined the transaction included. Now coming to the part of where I talk about transactions that are extra into the pool, into the blocks, and these can be either, for example, privately transmitted to the miner. These can be prioritized via out-of-band fee payments. These can be transactions that just didn't arrive at my node yet. So we're going to see here one example of a privately transmitted transaction by F2 pool or 2F2 pool. And in one block they mined, they included like 2 really large transactions, and they didn't pay any fees, these transactions. And normally we wouldn't relate these transactions on the Bitcoin network, so that's one reason to know that they were privately sent to the pool, or actually created by the pool and sent into the Bitcoin node, creating their block template. And it turns out that the first one is actually a consolidation transaction from their UTXOs into 2 outputs here, and the second transaction is payout transaction from the pool to the members of, or the miners actually working on the blocks at the pool. And this payout went to 3,750 around that miners. And we definitely have evidence for mining pools accepting out-of-band fee payments. Here, a block via BTC who run via BTC transaction accelerator. This block was missing 1,661 transactions. They still shared a lot of transactions with my template, but also had nearly 60 extra transactions. And they lost about 35 millibitcoin, which is around $1,000 of transaction fees, but they probably made up in out-of-band fee payments with other cryptocurrencies, or I don't know, via credit card payments or similar. Here we can plot the fee rate distribution in the block and the template. We can clearly see here the blue line is my template, how it should look like, and the red part is how it actually looks like in the block. We can see the pool included or prioritized the transactions that were paid out of bands really early on. Here quite some big transactions, and just started with the normal transactions at a later point. Obviously, this pushed out a few transactions that would be otherwise included, which are these 1,661 missing transactions. To end the story, Marathon Pool, after months of mining OFAC-compliant blocks and haven't included any, or actually didn't leave out any transactions. We didn't see any transactions missing at this time. There were probably not too many transactions. They would actually have been filtered at the time they actually mined blocks. So we checked multiple, or nearly all of their blocks, and none of those actually did include or did not include OFAC sanctions transactions. They decided to stop it. They decided to switch to a normal Bitcoin Core node, probably also to signal for Taproot and to be ready for Taproot. And this was a small win for, I say, the Bitcoin community, and to show that we actually can achieve something if we say, okay, we're not too happy with this. I don't know the exact reasons why they stopped doing it, but I think some of the outreach that people did actually had an impact there. To summarize, can we detect censorship by mining pools? I say yes, when it's done at scale. If there is a single miner only excluding one transaction, or single mining pool only excluding one transaction, we probably can't detect it. If it's happening over time, multiple times, by maybe even multiple pools, then we probably can detect it. Do we have any evidence for censorship? No. There is only this one pool that has been public about wanting to censor transactions, and yeah, as I mentioned, Marathon Pool actually never exclude any transactions that we would have included that are on the list of censored transactions. So no, not to the best of our knowledge. Maybe there is in the future. I don't know. We're probably going to detect it. So, and how to solve the root cause here, how to solve transaction censorship moving forward. So one idea and I think that would be ideal if we do it sooner than later, is to adopt certain V2 and its job negotiation protocol, where actually the actual miner running the ASIC can speak to the pool and say, I want to include this transaction. And if the pool says no, then the miner can just switch to another pool and say, okay, I'm not going to do business with you if you don't adhere to Bitcoin's properties. That is for me. Again, this tool is open source. You can run it yourself. You can also go into my website and check it out. Slides are there, and my handle is 0xb10c. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm a sustainable Bitcoin miner or blockchain miner or real miner. Do you think there's any chance you're a code coder, right? A software guy. That software guys on the so-called dark side send malicious software to a pool, and they could be hacked via software and eventually hack the hardware side of things, or
You mean sending what to?
code to the miner? Do you think there's a possibility to do that right now in practice?
I'm not sure if I can answer that question.
No question. Yeah. So, would it be fair to say you went out looking for censorship, but what you actually found was like kickbacks and graft in the mining pools if they're taking out-of-band payments without? Can miners detect that using your tool?
Yeah, so yeah, well, definitely I went out looking for censorship, and I found miners doing, or mining pools doing funny stuff. Yeah. We knew about these out-of-band payments beforehand. Obviously, the website of VIBTC is public. They announced their transaction accelerator there, and they obviously accept these payments publicly. So we knew about this beforehand, but now we have even more confidence in what these pools are doing and what they are not doing. Yes?
What did you say is unhealthy for us to be encouraging miners to take out-of-band fees? That seems like an unfair fee.
The question is if it's unhealthy for miners to take out-of-band payments, right? It might be. Obviously, there is not like the competition. You can pretty much steal money from the competition, which makes it harder, makes it less decentralized. Maybe that's a problem. Yes. Yes.
Also on the topic of out-of-band payments, was that via BTC blocking showed, was that like an exceptional thing, or is that like a regular thing? And do you have some data on like how much? I mean, it's pretty obvious how much of the block weight percentage-wise is out of band.
Right. So via BTC does this regularly, not in every block, but I think they even would do it for like every 1 hour or so. They would accept transactions, or 100 transactions or so. Maybe they even have, I don't know, maybe they even have like contracts with other people, more in a formal way of doing this. But this is definitely something we see regularly. So for example, the F2 pool thing I showed earlier, including their own transactions, this has a very similar pattern to it. And if I remember correctly, there were some other pools in the past doing this. I'm not sure if that's too common right now, because we don't have the big of a fee market right now.
I'm really curious to understand how and why you got involved with this specific subject.
That's a good question. Early 2021, I was reading a blog post by BitMEX Research, where they actually looked into this a bit more ad hoc than I did, and I thought I could improve on that, what they did, and I thought it was a fun project and would be helpful for us to know if there is actually any censorship, because I think Bitcoin is still like some kind of an experiment, And one property of this experiment is to be censorship resistant. And we need to evaluate if we actually are censorship resistant or can be censorship resistant to evaluate if Bitcoin can succeed or doesn't succeed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.